Recovering some disk space. Is Bitcoin D running right now? Sure is.
All right, we are live.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks, Stephen, for helping me on the stream side. So this is the next.
No, I'm the ghost of Terminus.
Yeah, Ghost of
Just
Terminus. Excuse me, John Thrasher. Thanks, John Thrasher. So welcome everybody. This is the next installment of the Legends of Lightning workshops we're doing here at Terminus, and this one is specifically building on Lightning. Today we're going to walk through a repo that we've put together, at the Terminus team has put together to kind of help with getting you set up with a very basic and easy to use template, so you can set up a Lightning network locally using RegTest, and then set up an app framework using React, and start building, start coding, and talking to your nodes and creating invoices. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. There we go. Cool. Thank you. All right. So as you can see here on the screen, we've got a repo. So if you go to github.com/terminusbtc/create-ln-app, and I can post that in the comment feed, you'll be able to see what I'm seeing. And this is the repo template that I was referencing. So to walk through this really quickly, we kind of talk about what this repo is and why it exists, and how to run it. So really quick, or if you're following along, either here in person or at home, go ahead and go to this link, and you could kind of follow through these steps real quick. So for me, I've already forked this repo, right? So I'm not able to fork it directly, but once you do that, or you can simply just copy this and clone it into your local environment. We'll walk through these next couple steps, and then we'll kind of talk about what's happening on the back end, and then we'll go from there. So let me get over to my repositories. Well, actually, I'm not going to walk through the process of cloning because I've already done that. So if you have questions or are confused about how to do that, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll address those directly. So once you've cloned, right, it'll just be as simple as either forking your own and cloning, or copying this and dropping it in here. You now should be able to see that this repo locally, right? So if I go back at directory and I get a long listing, you can see there is the directory. So I'm going to CD into that, and then you can open your favorite code editor. Personally, I prefer VS Code. But there's plenty of options out there. And so if you have VS Code, you can simply type code space, code and then period, and that will open this repo into Visual Studio. All right. So once you've done that, you can take a look at what's going on in this repo. Let me close the node modules, and I'll go ahead and delete that. So let's briefly walk through what we've got set up here and why, and how that's working. So obviously you can see the README here, git clone, and then npm run install all. Okay. So if you go back to the package JSON, you'll see that install all is just an npm script that we've set here to essentially just install the base directory. So the create ln app, which installs a package called concurrently that allows you to run two things using one npm script at the same time. And so if we do that, we'll do npm run install all. And so give it a second to download the internet, as Stephen likes to say. And so again, what's happening here is it's installing this concurrently package on this outer repo. It's then running install front end, which essentially just CDs into the front end directory, and then runs an npm install script, and then goes back to our main directory. So that way you're cleanly into and out of that front end directory, and all of your node packages are now set up. And so if you go look at the front end is basically just a React scripts a create React app, right? So if you look at the package JSON for that, you're going to see the scripts are the React scripts that you would commonly see for create React app. And that's kind of I do want to briefly touch on that. That's kind of the
Hey,
yeah.
real quick before you go any further, can you check your mic to make sure you're going through the snowball? Sorry, I should have flagged this before we went live.
No problem. Let me check real quick. Audio. Oh no, I'm going through the Mac. So sorry, everybody. Yeah. How about now? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, sure can. That sounds a good bit better, I think.
Okay, great. Yeah, apologies about that, guys.
Cool. Sorry to derail your train of thought.
No worries. Thanks for calling that out. So let me, looks like my battery's not charging and I just lost my screen. So give that 1 second to pop back up while I adjust my. Okay, now we're charging, I think. Okay, great. All right. Well, maybe not.
Yeah, it's charging. There you go.
No, it says it's not charging. But that's okay. As long as it doesn't die, which would be horrible. Okie dokie. So anyway, moving on. So yeah, to quickly just kind of talk about why we did this and what this is before we dive deeper into the setup is, so, there's a lot of talk in the Web3 DeFi crypto community about dApps and the future of that, et cetera. And really it feels like that term and like along with the Web3 term itself are pretty overused, and they kind of, when you overuse something across lots of places, it starts to dilute its meaning. And so it becomes very vague. So if everything is X, nothing is X in a way, philosophically speaking. So we wanted to try and reframe the thinking on building decentralized applications, but focusing with respect to the Lightning Network. Because at Terminus, we are a Bitcoin focused hackerspace, and we believe that Bitcoin will scale with the Lightning Network to be the global payment network. And we think it's valuable to give people tools and knowledge on how to build for that. So building the future of that network. So that's kind of why and what this is. So we're kind of calling it LN apps or LN app or LAP, any number of things. There's a typo there, so apologies for that. I'll have to fix that. But the why is, I mentioned a little bit of why, but also why is if you're familiar with create React app.dev, it's a very commonly used framework for setting up a React app template. And while we use that, right? So that's what the front end directory is. The front end is basically a create React app. Long term, I see this building out so we can reworking this to where we're not necessarily using create React app. Maybe we use our own framework. Maybe we use that framework, but we build it into our CLI. But long term, I would love to see something like this, right? So we actually now own this DNS, but unfortunately didn't get it set up in time. So eventually, once this propagates through Google's DNS, you'll be able to see something similar to what you see here, right? Not quite the same, obviously, but it'll be some lander that'll teach you how to use this create LN app. And so eventually, the vision is to see create-ln-app as a subcommand to a broader CLI that we at Terminus are striving to build. So one day, instead of npx create React app, you would be able to type in Terminus space create ln app space my app, and you'll get this entire template installed and ready to run in your local machine. So that's kind of the goal and the vision. We're very excited about it and very excited to share it with you guys today. So some prereqs before we get deeper into the code, into the project. So there are some software requirements, the pretty basic setup stuff, but you should make sure you have Node and NPM. So by installing Node, you default get NPM. You also need npx, which requires node and npm to install. You need Docker and you need Docker Compose, and then you also need Docker running. So if you have Docker Desktop, go ahead and open that because you'll need the engine started. And then if you're on a Mac, you can install these things pretty easily with Brew. If you don't have Homebrew, there's a quick little reference to the command for installing that.
And just a quick heads up.
Yep.
Linux now has a desktop version of Docker as well.
Oh, nice. There you go. So yeah, and these links should go to like, if I got it correctly, yeah. So this is like you can download the desktop version for Linux, for Mac, for Windows. You can also find binary installations here, which I played around with last night. So, pick your poison if you don't have it installed, but definitely make sure it's there before you try and attempt to run this stuff. And then Docker Compose, same kind of thing. Still, you need that. So you can click the link and it'll take you straight to a one-step install. Same for these other links. And there's a quick reference here for installing npx. And then, again, optional Homebrew. You don't have to have it if you're on Mac, but it's super convenient. And then these two things I included just because I like using a version management tool. So for Node, there's N and NVM. It makes it super easy to run something like the following. So if I want N, I can then select all these different versions of Node that I've installed. If you want N and get the latest LTS, it'll install the latest distribution that is stable from their servers, and so on. And right. So like, I'm going to switch back to what I was before, which I believe was 16 dot something or other, just because I don't want to mess anything up. No live demo, but yeah. So I would recommend installing one of those. Makes life super easy. I like N personally. NVM is a little heavier. It seems to run a little slower, and N runs really fast. So yeah. And then here in the useful information section, you'll find references for this specific repo for this specific Polar network that we're going to run today. And so in that network, in our folder, which I'll go to in a minute, you'll find in the backend folder, you'll find references to this, to the Polar networks and the Docker containers that we're going to spin up. And once those run, these are the default settings for that network, right? So if you wanted to swap out any of this stuff, you could easily download Polar and create a network and specify whatever you want in all the settings. And then once you're done, you can go in and export that. And when you export the zip, you can take it over to our backend, right? And you can drop it into this compose folder with the docker.yaml and export.json right there. So that'll let you just create your own network and spin up using one of our scripts here. So npm watch backend will just go into that folder and run whatever YAML's in there. Other convenient ways of doing that, if you're familiar with YAML and Docker Compose and editing all that, all the commands are hard-coded here, right? So you can see this is the backend for Bitcoin D with the RPC, the ZMQ subscriptions, the RPC binding, the ports, et cetera. And then it shows you where this data is being stored on your local drive. And then it's showing you which ports are being exposed. And then it's defining your 3 nodes. So in this case, we have Alice, Bob, and Carol, the classic 3 nodes. But yeah, if you wanted to edit in one day, eventually, as we build this out, we'll build in support for being able to customize stuff like this from the command line. But for now, this is just kind of hard coded, and that's how we're rolling with it. If you look in the export folder, you'll see a .zip, which is basically the same thing as the compose. It's just zipped up for you. And then images are, so if you wanted to build these from source, all these images that are specified in the YAML, if you want to build them individually, we have those pulled from Polar directly and stored here. So you would CD into those and you'd run a Docker build, and then you could run Docker up. We don't have any scripts for that yet, but that's coming. And then source. So I wanted to touch on this. You'll notice there's a .git modules in this in our repo, because I wanted to give support, and eventually we'll have CLI support, if you will, for building something from source. So if you wanted to, for example, build Bitcoin D, it doesn't look like it's in there right now. That sucks. But if you wanted to build your own network locally and run it locally and build it from the source directories themselves, you could do that. So you could build Bitcoin D in this folder, build core, LND declare, specify all of your stuff in the compose file, and then you've got 3 Docker containers running, building a Docker container from the source files and then spinning it up, or you're running it locally on your machine from those directories. And again, a lot of this stuff is future build out, but I just wanted to touch on it to give people an idea of what we're trying to do and how this repo is set up. Okay, so with that, we can get back to our main dir. So let's go back a couple directories. There we go. And then we can look at our scripts, and I think we ran install all, but just for good measure, we can run it again. Okay. Okay, and so the next command you can run, which is in the README, is npm start. Just simply npm start. And what this is going to do is it's going to basically look for any scripts that have the word watch and something after it. And so in this case, we've got 3 scripts that have watch in it: watch env, watch front end, and watch back end. And so what's going to happen here is it's going to run this command that's going to run this setup env file, which is basically going to rip through all the information in this export, grab the relevant stuff like the node's name, the admin macaroon, and it's going to turn the macaroon into a hex format so you can easily embed it into your header for the request to that node, the port for that node, its URL, etc. And then it's going to pop it into a .env file in your front end folder. And so the next thing it's going to do is it's going to go into the front end folder. It's going to start up your React app. And then the last thing it's going to do is going to go to the back end folder, and it's going to start up your back end Docker compose. So let's hold our breath and hope this works. Okay. All right. Look at that. Nice. So that went smoothly. So if you go look in your front end folder, as I mentioned, you've now got env variables for each node, including the names, the admin macaroons, the ports, the URLs, all of that fun stuff. Let me make sure this is on. Actually, you know what? Let me make sure this is on. Figure out what branch this is on. Let's see. You know what? You guys might not be able to access this, so let me go ahead and push this. And go check and make sure it's live here. Yep. All right, cool. So apologies about that. I hadn't pushed this. I've been working the last 24 to 48 hours on building some of this stuff out. So thanks for bearing with me. If you're in the repo now and you're not seeing what I'm seeing, go ahead and do a poll on that repo on master branch. And or if you're in your own fork, there's a way to sync with the remote fork that I don't know off the top of my head. And that will give you this stuff, all this stuff here. Okay, so I'm getting errors. Well, doesn't matter because it's running. Cool. So if you pull it down, run the install scripts, and then run the start script, you should be seeing something similar to what I'm seeing now. So you should have your .env with all your information. You should have your backend puller running as such. And then you should see this auto open to this create LN app. And so I'm going to go ahead and caveat that most of this stuff on the front end right now actually does not work, unfortunately. We were going at breakneck speeds to try and get this to a usable place. There is one feature here that is usable at the top. The rest of it, unfortunately, is not wired up to work. So, thanks for, being understanding with us as we're actively developing this. But we're still going to walk through how to use the URLs and how to talk to LND. We're just not going to be able to do it from the front end. And then maybe if we have some time and interest, we'll walk through how to write some code on the front end to maybe build out some of these functionalities. And so, yeah, so now that we've kind of got this running, you can drop this down. You can see, okay, who am I? All right. So you can select which node you would like to be. Everything was going too smoothly. All right. Well, live debugging. Let's go. Let's see what we got. Okay. Well, we've got a problem with the way it's reading in the env variables. Let's see.
Looks like I'm getting a cores error.
Okay. Lightning store. Why am I getting this? This is interesting. Module has no exported number, create context. Huh. That's not a good error to see, but let's see. Imports. Let's go to the app. Index.
Did that start happening after you did a pull?
Maybe. I don't know what's going on here. That's frustrating.
Try stopping it and running an npm install or an npm update.
Yeah. All right. Let's do this one at a time. So working out the kinks, folks. Thanks for your patience. So if we just open 2 terminal windows and run the watch front end, and on the other one, npm run watch backend. That's been up. I see. Okay. Lightning store.ts error. Wow. Lots of problems here. Oh, I accidentally pasted. I foobarred. Okay. I pasted a foobar. There we go. Classic. All right. Here we go. Let's go back and see what we got. Okay. Constructed. Cool. Let's see if we can now select. Sure can't. Okay. Well, that's frustrating. Let's see. What did I do? All right. So while I'm doing this, I'll walk through some of the code here and what's being done. And so what we've done here is created a lightning store that outlines some. It's a class that outlines some static variables like the endpoint, the macaroon, who you are, and then it's initializing that information with who am I, and basically just setting the environment variables. And then on the app side, let's go to index.ts, index.ts, and then app. Well, I'm missing all of my stuff here. That's the problem. Huh. Man, well, that sucks. Let's see. Yeah, man. Somehow foobar deleting my entire app file. Okay. Well. Okay. That's the problem. Let's see which repo. This is what happens when you have too many repos that you cloned locally at the same time. Okay. Okay, that is the proper branch. No, what? How is that going? Sheesh. What did I do? Man, maybe it's page. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Now I'm back. All right, cool. So this is where all the apologies, everybody. I got mixed up in my own repo. So the app file is pulling in the page variable here. That's the part I was missing. Great. All right. So this is all the logic for this page, and it's essentially setting up your Lightning store so you can use Lightning, which again is, like I said, a lot of this is unimplemented, which maybe we can try and walk through implementing at least one of these today. And then you've got functions like who am I to set the me variable. You've got things in here in the page. So that's how it's handling. Wait, where's the, this is not right either. Jeez, I am messing this up, man. Let's see. Let's get I'm about to abandon this because I'm not sure exactly where my code went. Somehow in the transition from my home to Terminus today, I have lost all the code that I wrote this morning. Good times. That's what happens when you're going too fast. So I apologize, everybody. Components, page. Not the right one either. Bummer. Okay, well, since this is where we're at, let's go ahead and let's see if I can simply rerun. So let's do cd front end and then make sure we're good. And then we'll do an npm install on front end just to reinstall those node packages. Then we'll do npm start inside here. Oops. Okay, let's pull up Postman, and I can at least walk us through how to talk to our nodes. While that's spinning up. Let's see if this works. Okay, well, this is old code, so that's what I get. All right, cool. So anyway, let's go to our env file and where you can find all of your URLs. And let's take this macaroon. We'll stick it here. So you want to have a header in your request called grpc-metadata-macaroon, and then you would paste in the macaroon from the env file. From there, you go back and see that the URL for Alice's node is such. So you grab that and paste that here. And so now, I think another thing you need to do is go to settings and make sure to turn off enable SSL verification because you're running a localhost on HTTPS, and it's going to throw errors at you if you don't disable that. So if you do something like get info, okay, other bug. So I've seen this before. This is usually something to do with the macaroon. Let's see if I can figure this out. So if you go to the README, you see something like this, right? It usually means there's something wrong with your macaroon locally. And so if you want to figure out, my first step would be to go to the README and reference, okay, here's where Alice's macaroon information is. So let me go to that folder. Let me open a better terminal window so you can actually see what I'm doing. So it's usually in your home directory, which you can prefix by tilde and then .polar networks one volume. So let's go to actually tilde.polar. Oops. Well, if I spelled it right. All right, cool. So now if we look in here, networks, then we can see the first network, go to volumes, LD, Alice, data, chain, Bitcoin, reg test, and there's our macaroons. Okay, so there's a handy command. If you go in the README, there is a link to the REST API for LD. If you click on that link, it'll show you all the possible routes that you can hit to get information from your node. And so if you click on one of them, it'll show you at the top in Python or Shell or JavaScript how to basically how to A, make the API call, but then B, it'll show you a way to get your macaroon into the state that you want it. And so since I'm running in Shell right now here, I'm going to grab this command. So xxd is, I think, a hex dump command for terminal for Linux, Unix-based machines. And then you can, since you're already in the directory, you just pass admin.macaroon, and then there's your macaroon in hex dump format. So just take this back to here, paste that, and see if this works. So it's not, right? Okay, so that's because I'm actually running this out of my local dir, right? And so I've run Polar locally via the app, and it puts things here. So that's a good learning for me because I'm going to guess that right now, because I'm running it inside my directory, inside this create LN app folder, Alice's proper admin macaroon is down in here, right? And so if we want that, we would need to do the same command that we did a minute ago, but then give it the path to the backend, Docker compose, volumes, LMD, data, LMD, Alice, data, chain, Bitcoin, reg test, admin. So this doesn't work. I'm out of guesses. We'll have to do some real debugging. There we go. Thank God. All right, cool. So that's a foo bar on my part. So I'll update the README to reflect that. Basically, you want to, since we're not using the app right now because my code is deleted because I did something stupid. Normally what would happen is this would spin up, and on the front end, you'd be able to select Alice, and then it would drop down with all the information about Alice here. And then you could just copy paste the macaroon. But in this case, we're just getting it from this directory. And so in the README, I'll update that path so that it's reflective of where the actual data will be. So it would be in this folder /backend. All right, cool. All right, so yeah, so now that we've got that fixed up, so this is the idea. This is how you can basically now interact with Alice's node as Alice. And so you can see all the information about Alice, the pub key for Alice, any URIs. So this is where you could connect with Alice and open a channel. Let's see what else is in here. Yeah, and just some information about the node and where it's running and what network and if it's been synced, etc. So let's see. Let's do get network info. Not found yet. Wasn't sure if that was the command. All right, so let's go back here and see if we can just play around with making some API calls. So let's see if we can make a call to see what the balance is for Alice's node. Cool. So yeah, so you can see here Alice has no Bitcoins, just brand new node, still not fully spun up yet. Yeah. Let's see if we can create an invoice. Cool. Let's see. All right. So for invoicing, they've got, looks like type r hash string, r hash. So that may be a little tough because it's requiring some additional information in specific formats, and I haven't run through this yet, so I apologize, guys. So since we're kind of in this state where things are not really working as I would have desired, I'm going to go ahead and shut down, and I'm going to pull out Polar Desktop and walk through some of that on the front end to give you an idea of how to then use Polar, how to interact with nodes locally and create invoices, and all of that good stuff. So this is Polar's front end. This is what you would be you're interacting with when you're spinning up the Docker Compose nodes. And so if you can just download this from from the internet, a disk image, or if it's a Mac or an executable for Windows, and then you'll get this nice little clean experience where you can create a network and specify nodes, and then just click create, and it'll show up here. And so here I've got, this is the exact network that we were running a minute ago. And so if I spin this up, it might throw an error at me because I've already built these containers. So if you get something like that, it's basically saying you've already got these containers and they're not connected directly to this Polar app running. So you just got to kill these containers that you built in the back end. And then from here, you can restart. Okay, now we're live. And so you've got 3 nodes, Carol, Bob, Alice, and one backend that they're all sharing. And if we click on the back end, we can see similar information to what we're trying to show in the other app. So username, password, where all the ports are opened and listening, And then you can take actions here. So you can manually mine 6 blocks. You can send coins on chain. So you can specify an amount and specify an address. Let's see, let's do some quick mining. All right, so you can see here, after mining to height 10, we have an immature balance of 500 Bitcoins, but we don't have any spendable because of the rules, the consensus rules on, I believe it's 100 blocks before you can spend mined Bitcoin. So let's go ahead and take some action to mine a bunch of blocks. Okay. Oh, there we go. Took a second. A lot of mining in the background. Okay, cool. So now we've got an immature balance of 5,000 and spendable is 100 Bitcoins, right? And so as a result, now we could click Alice. And this again will give you similar information that we're spitting out in the app. I'd just like to call out that you can use Polar like this. It's super clean, very easy. It's an absolutely beautiful application. The goal with us for this repo is if you wanted to essentially connect it with your front end, we're trying to make that as easy as possible for you. So while we've had some difficulties today, it'll be my goal in the coming days to get this thing into a more usable and ready place so you can do some basic things like opening channels, mining blocks quickly, etc. But in the interim, just to kind of display what the way Polar should work is we're going to use the app. So again, you can do things here like you can deposit some funds. So for Alice, let's deposit some funds. I believe this is in Sats. So if we go look at our back end, we should see a drop, right? So let's deposit some more funds for Alice. Open some fat channels. Let's deposit a whole Bitcoin. Cool. All right, so now we're loaded and we can open the channel. So there's 2 ways you can do this using Polar. You can either drag and drop, which is super cool. And then if you let go, it'll open a channel to Bob. Or you can specify an outgoing channel, specify Bob as the destination. Let's make the capacity 100,000 sats, and then open the channel. Let's see, funding amount too large. Yeah, of course. Let's mine some more blocks. This might take a second. Let's go back to Alice and take some actions, deposit a couple more Bitcoins. Okay, cool. So now you have a bunch of Bitcoin. 104,000. Just over a Bitcoin. Let's go back to the back end. Okay. Maybe the deposit didn't quite go through because it was still mining blocks, which makes sense. So let's see if we can redeposit 2 Bitcoins. All right, cool. Yeah. Sorry, guys. I am not putting in 2 whole Bitcoins. I keep putting in 0.1 of a Bitcoin. There we go. All right, cool. So now we've got three Bitcoins on Alice's node, and we can do some connections to maybe Bob. So let's create an outgoing channel to Bob. Make it for a Bitcoin. Open channel. Cool. So let's create now with the drag and drop from Bob to Carol. Let's see. Actually, let's deposit a couple of Bitcoins there. Cool. So now Bob's got 2 Bitcoins. Alice has. Did I just open a channel with? Yeah, I did, didn't I? I opened a 1.1 Bitcoin channel accidentally. That's okay. We'll run with it. So let's open a channel from Bob to Carol, and we'll do it for 100,000 sats. Oops. Excuse me, 1 million sats. All right, cool. So now we've got a 1 million sat channel from Alice to Bob and a 1 million sat channel from Bob to Carol. And so let's see if we can pay Carol. So as Carol, let's deposit some funds to her for good measure. And then let's create an invoice for 500,000 sats, which is a fat one. Cool. So now you've got the invoice. So if you're Alice and you have outbound to Bob and Bob is outbound to Carol, you can go and make a payment. You paste that in there, click pay invoice. Successfully paid. So now we can see the balances have shifted. So now it's kind of like a rebalance in a way in this chain. Everybody's kind of now balanced out. If we were able to create, let's see. Create channels backwards through from Carol to Bob to Alice. Yes. So it looks like Bob needs some more Bitcoin. Let's get Bob some more Bitcoin. Funding too large, max channel sizes. I see. Okay, so we can't open because of max channel size being set. So let's do 10 then. Okay, cool. So now we've got a reverse flow of information. And so I wonder if Polar will let Alice pay herself. So let's create an invoice for 100,000 sats. And then let's pay the invoice. Yeah, self-payment's not allowed. Figures. That's okay. So let's pay back through Carol to Alice. So let's create an invoice here. Let's create it for 500,000 sats. Copy, go to Carol, and then pay that invoice from Carol to Alice. And so now you can see the flows changed again, right? So as funds have flowed through back and forth through the nodes, the channels are reflecting that on the front end. So it's a nice little clean experience and way to interact with a local reg test network. Okay. Cool. Well, that's a lot of the content that I had. Let's see if there's anything that I have here. So a good reference for this kind of stuff, for specifically this Polar, is docs.lightning.engineering. And you can go check out, they kind of walk you through the basics of what I was kind of walking you through. And so let's see if maybe we can make an API call here. Do some live coding. Lighting store.
Brian,
Yeah.
do you have to stop the create LN app backend to run Polar?
Create LN app backend to run. Yeah. So if you try and run both at the same time, because well, I guess it depends. So if you run the create LN app backend, and then you run the exact same network on Polar, right? So like all the same node names and configuration files, it's going to throw an error, because if you go look, if you have Docker Desktop, you can just easily look at this. All the names are the same. So backend 1, Alice, Bob, Carol. But if you go into Polar, and so if you're running the backend and you create like, my new network, and then create 3 L&D nodes and a Bitcoin Core backend, you should be able to create this. And then I think you can edit the names of these things.
So as long as there's no name collision, it'll be fine.
I believe so, yeah. I don't know if you can edit the names in the front end here, but you can definitely edit names in the CLI. So if you were like proficient with, because like, all right, let's see. If I try and run this. Interesting. I think it's having a collision because of the pathing. So you're creating a similar network to the one you already have created, and so it's trying to reuse that same folder. But there should be a way to easily specify like changes to the images, and so I again, like Polar's good for the very basics, right? Like to be able to spin this stuff up. I know there's a way to manage the images themselves. Like you can click here and pull in, like, for example, there should be new releases as of this past week because of the hotfix stuff. And you can even create a custom node, which I think like Hannah over at Lightning Labs has walked people through multiple times for Taro, importing your own custom node and then building from that image. And then, you can, if you have another Polar network with images, you could import it. But anyway, this is actually a good question, Jordan. Thank you for asking it, because it's kind of a driver for us too, for giving this resource to people so that they can easily specify in the Docker Compose file. Like if I wanted to change all this, I could just, and then this would be like Brian, and then I change let's see, on every instance of Alice. And then paste Brian in there. And then we'll go to Bob and put Jordan. And then for Carol, we can put Steven. And then container name, backend. So let's change this container from backend 1 to Bitcoin D1. And then change the container name from backend 1 to Bitcoin D1. Or user. I think this should work. So if I save that, let me go kill. I think this is still running. Yeah, stop this. That worked. Go back to here. Let's get rid of my node modules just for good measure. There's a lot of data in there.
Yeah.
There we go. Get rid of the package locks. Okay. And then let's walk back through the install. So let's run this again. Yeah, this code is outdated. I don't know what I did with my code, man. That is wild. A good lesson to learn early in your career. Always put your code. Pretty sure it was on. I was trying to use branching. Let's look at. So this is where I merged in Alex, and this is where I resolved the merged problems, but somehow the code I had just never got pushed, which is a bummer. Anyway,
that sucks.
Yeah, I had a whole bunch of code there, and so that's what happens when you're coding literally 10 minutes. You start the
Damn.
Yeah, it's okay. And I'm getting all these weird errors that I wasn't before, like process not being able to be found.
Huh.
React DOM not being found. I mean, I guess right now it makes sense because it's still installing the.
Yeah, give it a second.
Yeah, it's running really slow. I don't know if we have any streamers. If anyone's watching or has questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I don't think we have anybody live. That's okay. So anyway, I got distracted, so I apologize. But my point here was, when you have the front end, you're limited. The front end has limited functionality, and so editing the files, you can do all of that by getting into the local directory that I showed earlier. So Polar creates this local dot at your home dot Polar. And this is all the information, right? So like if you cat, let's see, nodes. Yeah, so you can see like these are all the images that they show you on the front end. And then if you go into the networks like I showed earlier, I wonder what, let's see, it's open settings. But yeah, so I mean, like I was saying, like you can open this folder if you're running the desktop version, and then you could, let me show you, and you can edit the images. But we're trying to give it to you in a place that is easy to work with out of the box and also has a framework for apps, for an app development built into it. And so, yeah, so you can see here, like this is the network that you were seeing on the front end of the app. These are all the specifications for it. And then if you go again to the Docker Compose, like this is exactly what is in our repo. And so while you can just edit this and rebuild and rerun, we're trying to just put it all into one place for you. And eventually it would be customizable and easily to like, you could easily run scripts and specify all kinds of stuff that will pass through into this YAML and spin up a custom network. And you could do hot changes potentially. So you could like change things while you're developing. So you keep your front end server running and then you like spin down your back end. And then you rerun the back end, but you pass in different arguments or a different YAML file or whatever it is. And now you can just easily like swap. Literally, you can unplug and plug in different networks. So let's say, for example, you wanted to build an app that works on all distributions. So LND, Core Lightning, etc. And you wanted to be able to test, or at least you're writing code that is, you want interoperable between nodes. You could test and build with LND because it's maybe your focus for your app, but then you spin that down, pull in your other YAML and build with that has Core Lightning nodes in it and LND nodes. And now you've got a plug in and unplug and plug in a network functionality. And maybe that's a future feature where we have multiple of these compose files for different types of networks. And when you go to pull down this repo, you can do things like specify, I want one LND only network, one network with multiple types of nodes, one network with only core, one network with a Claire, and they all have different names. So maybe you could run multiple different types of Lightning networks. And then you'd have URLs for all those nodes. And you could just basically swap in and out the URLs easily with some code on the front end to then interact and test different features across different types of networks. All right. So now that we're done with that, let's see if we can go, let's look back at our package.json and we'll do npm run watch backend. And let's see if our changes worked. Yep. So you can see creating Polar N1, Stephen, Jordan, Brian, Bitcoin D1. And so these are all the same names as the other images that I have here, or at least I had. No, interesting. So I wonder if it just swapped that. Yeah, compose. This is my local container. Let's see if I can now run Polar at the same time. It might not work because of the URL specs. So interesting. So yeah, you're getting some errors here, but that's likely because you can't run two networks with nodes running on the same ports.
Right.
So you'd have to just be able to have an easy way to customize the backend such that you can specify like different ports for LND across different networks. So we've got this one running, this compose one, which is from the repo that I just started a minute ago, and this is the one from Polar's front end. And you can see these are failing because they're trying to listen on port like 10,009, 10,010, whatever. And those ports are the same as the ports that are being used by this other network. And so you just have to like alter that a little bit. And if you do, you'd be okay. You'd be able to run multiple concurrently.
So as long as they don't have a name collision or port collision.
Yep. So like like you can see here, RPC listing 10,009 for Stephen, and then your node also on 10,009, 8080, but it's not the node on the Docker container. That's not the problem. The problem is where their ports are bound. So like, for example, when you go look at Stephen's node, you're exposing these three ports and then you're binding them to to the outer, like, because it's inside of its own Docker container network.
The external port. Right.
So the external port needs to just be different. And so like, if you wanted to spin up two networks, you could spin up this one and then you just alter these to be like 8084, 8085, 10,004, 10,005, 9737, or 38, 39, etc. And just bind them to the internal port, which each of them is running their own, so they can all have the same 8080, etc. But you just got to bind it to something different on the outside. What would be cool is a way to basically spin up one backend, right? So you could like spin up one backend Bitcoin container with all this, like just you, and then you reuse it across multiple network files. So if you had multiple Docker Compose files and all of these set up so that you've got these 3 nodes running on 81, 10,001, 35, and then 82, so on. And then you created another file that starts at 80, 84 here, and then 85 and 86, and you renamed them and reran it, but you specified the same Bitcoin D as the other network, you could potentially, I think you should be able to, without creating a new, actually, you wouldn't even need to specify this because this would already be running in the other network. And so long as you have the proper information here to then connect to this backend Bitcoin D1, you could have a network over here of multiple different types of nodes, and then it would all talk to that backend. And then you could have a network over here with different types of nodes, and it would talk to the same backend. So that'd be a good way to like keep, because running 6 containers might get costly for your computer's resources. So
can you run as many LND nodes or any Lightning nodes as you want with only one Bitcoin D node?
I think so. So I think I don't think there's a limit, but we could see if we can add. Let's add another node here. I think something I did wrong as well is when you rename this container to Bitcoin D1, you got to look throughout the other LND images because they're going to have Polar N1 backend 1, right? So we've renamed this to Polar N1 Bitcoin D1. So if we rename this to backend 1 and then find all the instances of backend 1, we can just delete and do Bitcoin D1. Then we could stop this network, and then let's rebuild it. Oh, well, before I do that, I gotta change the ports. Do what I was just saying. 49738. And I think that should be good. Let's see. Yeah, so it's recreating these because I've changed settings. It's starting up Bitcoin D because Bitcoin D1 was already built and ready to go. And then it created this new one. And so now I've got backend running, I've got Bryan running, I've got John running, I've got Jordan running, and I've got Stephen running. And so you can see output for Bitcoin D. You can also see John's output as it's setting to the primary chain, opening the wallets, and then now listening for RPC calls and syncing with the chain's backend. So there you go. Okay, so now that that's running again, let's see if I can start up the front end and then make an API call from the code base here. Let's go back and do run, watch.
Is a script so you can do watch front end and then watch back end in the other?
Yeah, so from the outermost repo, you can run any of these individually. And then you can run the start, which will run anything that has a watch in front of it. So like watch all this is saying is look for NPM scripts that have, what did I do? Actually, I tried to run it again. Look for NPM scripts that have this form. So watch : star. And if you see something in this scripts section that has a watch : and then something after it, run that and run it in order and run it more or less at the same time. So in the back end, it's going to.
So you'd want to do the env, then front end, then back end.
Yeah. So yeah, you'd want to run env to then pop out your .env file with all of your information in it. And then you'd want to run npm watch backend, and then npm, and then in a new to get output for the development server for the front end alone, you just have to open a new terminal window and then run npm run front end, or watch front end. Okay. Am I still getting errors? No. All right, cool. So yeah, initially must have been something wrong with my package stuff locally, and it was throwing errors all over the place. So yeah. Let's see, open a new terminal window. It's gonna kill me not to know where that code went. And get stashed. What if I put it on there? Nope, that's definitely not it. For reference, I'm doing things like B and like stash because I have a bunch of aliases in my ZSHRC that just alias to Git commands. So B is like Git branch, stash is Git stash, etc. So if that's confusing for anybody. All right, let's see, package. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it doesn't even have, like, I had to install a node fetch package. It doesn't even have that in there. So all right, well, let's go ahead and do that. So let's go into the front end and then npm install, save. Computer is lagging. And let's let that install. And so what we can do here in a second, once that installs and then we move forward, is so we're reading in React app node 1 URL. Let's go check the env, make sure that's accurate. Yeah. So a nuance about React app is all the env bars have to start with React app in the local environment, .env, to then actually be usable in the app itself. And then you just kind of read it in as such. Okay, that installed. So let's, all right, so on initialization of the app, it's going to create this Lightning Store context, which has all of your wrapper functions to then make API calls from. And then it's got the app itself, which is just an app function in a container. And then we've got a page var component that has all of your logic that you're seeing on the front end here. And so a way to easily just add into this would be, so, all right, we've got these drop downs, Alice, Bob, Carol. Let's change that value to, actually just leave it. And then we can go over, look at handle. So handle, on the change event, it's going to grab the event, the target, and the value, which should be Alice. So let me select Alice from here. That works. Let's check the inspector. Should console log some stuff. Right. So yeah, you can see here, there's Alice's macaroon. There's the URL for her. So then you can go look at the next thing after it handles who am I. It's hitting the store and setting the name of the person here. And then initialize should be, let's see. Oh, so I think initialize is back here. Yeah. Initialize. So on load, and this, I'm not gonna lie, I don't really particularly like this setup. We wrote this code pretty quickly because on app load, before it even loads the actual app, it's loading this context and then setting the variables for you. So ideally what I would like to do is move this logic over to the either the app file or the page file so that you can dynamically set who you want to be, as opposed to initially it's just setting you to Alice. So anyway, but for now, we've got access via these two variables to a REST endpoint and admin macaroon, and then that's been initialized into our Lightning store. And so from here, I don't know if Polar supports adding peers, and I couldn't find a route in LND's REST for a peer edition. Not saying it's not there, but I just couldn't find it. But anyway, you can list peers. Here's a peer subscribe. Maybe that's it. Get. Subscribe peer events creates a unidirectional stream from the server to the client in which any events relevant to the state of peers are sent over. Events include peers going on and offline. But it's a get request, which is interesting. Where is it a get request? It says get, but they're passing in information. Let's see what it looks like in JavaScript. So a handy little thing about this API reference is, granted, this is common JS, which if I had my, I would have probably, we'll probably rewrite this into common just for simplicity's sake, because TypeScript's way more strict and it's a bit more of a pain in the butt to work with, in my opinion, when you're trying to work really quickly. Nonetheless, this at least has like the general form of how to structure this request in JavaScript. So if you were doing common JS, you could just copy this and then paste it in there. Unfortunately, I can't do that because unless I set up everything as a common JS file, which would take way too long. So let's just go ahead and import node fetch. And in here, we can set up a response variable and await a fetch. And so fetch takes a URL. And so in this case, you'd want this dot rest endpoint, which if we go look at the console is not the right one. Right. No, that's fine. Yeah, rest endpoint. So it doesn't like it. Cannot find. Did I misspell it? So this is why I don't like TypeScript, because it's yelling at me because this is a string, but fetch requires a request info object. So let's go look at fetch. What is request info? Is either a string or a request. Okay, well, this is a string. So let's just get rid of the. Let's just make it for ease. We can just make it any. That's just like basically not defining a var on it. So that way you can just kind of pass stuff around easily. It's probably not good for like security, but for quick, nasty development, just fine. And so then in the second part argument for fetch, you want to pass the request object. And so we could go back to the docs and do where are peers? Let's do peers. I think this is let's change this to list peers. So we want to then append this URL, since the URL contains everything up to v1. Pass that / peers. And then in the header, we want to copy this. And then we want admin macaroon. Oh, yeah. And then for the sake of congruency, just add these other fields to your request. Let's see if you do that. It doesn't like that. So fetch probably doesn't have that. Yeah, so that's also not in the TypeScript package for fetch. Let's go back here and take a look at what it wants. All right, so we need to define the method here. Which in this case is a get. Let's see if we can get it to execute like so. So then we want to do like something like data, and then await response.json. Then we'll just print out the data. So with peers, so if we go back to the page, we could take that function that we just wrote, and then we could, let's change this to list peers, and on-click lightning store dot peers. Let's see if it works. Get some nasty errors. Node buffer is not handled by plugins. Huh. Interesting. Let's see. I ran into this earlier, and I cannot for the life of me remember why it was yelling at me for this. So let's see if we can use the good old Google. You know what I think it is? I think it is you don't import fetch, but you can still call fetch from within here. That might be it. That's it. Add peer. It's because we changed the name to list peers. So where is it yelling at me? Opponents page 19. Let's comment that out for now. So let's select Alice. And then we'll change this to list peers to be semantic. Go back. All right. And then we'll open up the inspector window because we're expecting some errors. Potentially. List. Cert authority invalid. So this probably has something to do with the allow unauthorized they were having us pass in the header of that request. Let's go look at fetch. Let's see if I can figure out what we need to pass for that. Another handy part of Postman is if you wanted to get, for example, like what does this look like if you wanted to write it in code? This will give you exactly what it looks like, right? So I could just copy, redirect, follow, see if maybe that helps. So body cache, credentials, method. Let's see, what is the request credentials? So let's see, let's go back to their docs. Reject unauthorized. So yeah, failed to fetch. Maybe it's a course problem, mode. Good, same origin. The art of Google. We got Node.js, invalid. Nope, no answers there. Let's see.
Brian, I have a question.
Yeah.
So just to see if I could get Polar going, I started it up and it's doing the name collision. It says the container names are in use.
Yep.
So do I have to remove the ones that were created by LNApp?
Yeah, I would go in and delete those. That's a good it's a good thought for me, because maybe we could do something that, because right now there's no cleanup on the kill, right? So if you kill the process, maybe there's a way to clean up the Docker containers. So when you run it from npm watch backend, I'll make a note so that if you kill that process, we then go through, run a script, clean up the Docker containers, and if you throw a flag, we'll clean it up afterwards or something like that.
And then maybe also name the containers differently in case Polar is also running, so it doesn't conflict.
Yeah, good idea. So I found the answer, and it's the same thing they're doing in the other one, but this one's using Axios, but I don't see a reject unauthorized. Maybe there's an HTTPS. Let's see. We're coming up on the end of the session. I hope, even though we ran into some issues, I hope this was still fruitful for either people watching or people who will be watching. Realize it was not ideal, but appreciate everybody's understanding with the in real-time demo always goes wrong. So yeah, but we'll see if we can at least get this request made from the app to the backend before we go. Let's see if I can find no fetch options, user agent, etc. Proxy options, node URL.parse. Oh, interesting. Let's see if this proxy agent options. So options, let's do agent. Then they did a new proxy agent. Interesting. Proxy options, which is just the URL parse. Proxy options.reject unauthorized. And that goes options.agent equals that. So let's see if we agent. Does not exist. Bummer. You know what? I just realized I can do this. Probably. I actually use this quite often in my day-to-day. So kill the front end, and then cd front end, and then do node TLS reject authorize equals 0 as an environment variable leading the npm start. Let's see if this helps us out. Give me my backpack. Thank you. Maybe we'll have to do a follow-up session once we've got things stabilized on the code side, and we can do a little more.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, a little more development. All right, cool. All right, so what I've done here is we're getting this issue, and as I'm less familiar with TypeScript, unfortunately, it's a struggle. I'm struggling to understand exactly how to work around this reject and authorized issue, which, for what it's worth, again, inside of Postman, you can just simply unflag that, right? And so I'm not sure. I wonder if I looked at the headers here. Redirect. Maybe redirect is helping it. Look at that. Add redirect. Some of these I'm not 100% familiar with. All right. Either way, I killed the front end and then I restarted it with this node reject TLS unauthorized equals 0, basically turning that feature off for node, which I use that actually on a day-to-day basis in my full-time role because there's pretty strict when you work for a company that handles Bitcoin. It's, as you can imagine, you got a lot of high security requirements. And so when I'm doing local dev, the security requirements are not quite as high. So I can do things like turning off TLS. It's not saying interesting. Okay. That's progress. So yeah, that turning off TLS in the start actually worked. But I threw the wrong mode in there. So let's just get rid of mode and see if we can then rerun this. Nope. Cert authority invalid. Bummer. Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to make that happen. Not for lack of trying, but that is more or less the content I have for you guys today. So we covered a lot of things. To recap, we covered this React Create LN app that we're trying to spin up at Terminus and give to the community. So this is an open source effort. It is brand new, as you can tell. And we are actively trying to develop it out for newbies or just anybody who's trying to start up quickly. So if you find this exciting or interesting and you want to help contribute, very much welcome that. And you can find that repo over at Terminus BTC/create LN app. Fork it and then create a feature branch, add some code, submit a PR. If you run into problems while you're doing that, definitely submit an issue and we'll address that as they come. And in the meantime, we will be hard at work trying to make this tool more of a tool and less of a hassle, make it more effective at what it's trying to do. And then other things we covered are Polar, right? So Polar is your friend if you're trying to do something quickly and test and build locally and not have to worry about building from source or syncing to the blockchain because you're using reg test and how to basically open channels and do all that fun stuff. And then obviously the code here is meant to be a template app and help you kind of get the feel for the flow of interacting with nodes from the front end, talking in between nodes, opening channels, setting which node you want to be, etc. So a little bit of a way to kind of rebuild the front end of Polar, but into a web app in a way. So that way you could then extend it and build out all kinds of cool things like payment portals or applications with integration for Lightning. And so as things get progressed with us, we'll continue to figure out good ways to make this a composable project, so that way you could plug it into your application and start working. And with that, I'll go ahead and close the session. Thanks everybody. If you were watching online, thanks for doing that. Jordan, thanks for being here. Hope you learned something. And yeah, have a great weekend, everybody. And feel free to follow us over at Terminus BTC on Twitter for more updates and Bolt.fun as things progress for the Legends of Lightning tournament. You can contact me on Twitter too with any questions or thoughts or anything at Nonni.io. And until next time.